Welcome to Furious Fiction. I'm Jules Graham, and with me is Mark Mustion. And Mark, who are we talking to today?
Well, we're so honored. We have Charles Yu. He's the author of How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe, and he's the author of a wonderful story collection that's out recently called Sorry, Please, Thank You. So, Charlie, welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And I wanted to ask you about a couple of the stories in the story collection really quick, because a couple of them really kind of jumped out at me. One is the one, Hero Absorbs Major Damage, about the kind of it's a guy in a video game from his point of view. And just that one, did that, you know, I've never seen that before. I mean, did that just come to you, or I thought it was very true to life, including the 12-year-old guy who's kind of controlling the whole thing.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, I grew up, you know, with video games. I'm part of the generation where I didn't really know a world without video games, but they've certainly changed a lot in the time, you know, since I was first playing them as a, you know, little kid. And now they're to the point where you could imagine yourself being immersed, not just imagine yourself, people are literally immersed in these games sometimes with a huge screen and, you know, other sort of technological advancements that allow you to feel like you're inside of that world. And it's a form of storytelling in its own right. It's a, you know, it's a kind of major form of mass entertainment, but it's also a new form of storytelling. And it's something that I think is so ingrained in my imagination personally that it only seemed sort of natural that eventually I would either want to tell a story through the devices of a video game, or, you know, and or with the subject matter being a video game. So they both kind of came together in that story. And I actually expect it's probably not the last time I'll end up writing about video games in some way.
Well, Charlie, I wanted to ask you about your writing process. You've said previously that when you can't write, you sort of take yourself away and you kind of counterfeit write. You pretend, or you tell yourself you're not really writing, and then the ideas start to flow, and then you do all of these little diagrams. Do you still draw when you're writing?
I do, Jules. And what I do is I forget that for some reason. I should tape it to every room, you know, where I write anywhere, or just tape it to my computer, but I don't. And so I forget that, and I always come back to it. I always come back to getting out of this kind of linear mode of thinking, both sort of left to right and top to down, and just letting sort of my mind literally roam around kind of the blank page that I'm staring at. And when I can get there, then I stop the counterfeiting and I get into something, you know, that feels a little bit more authentic, or at least raw.
Well, speaking of linear way of thinking, you're a lawyer, right?
I am.
I'm a lawyer. We're everywhere. But do you still practice law?
I do. Yes.
And so how do you divorce yourself, you know, from that way of thinking to this way of thinking?
That's a great question, Mark. I don't know that I totally do, and I don't know that, you know, I'm usually not successful at doing it, and so it is a necessary process for me. Which is not to say that there's nothing I get out of it. And, you know, I know you're both a lawyer and a writer as well. And you know, having both done it, I think it's probably a very interesting conversation as to how the two ways of thinking, you know, to be reductive about it, both kind of help and maybe hurt each other.
Absolutely.
So now everybody at work knows that you're a writer as well now. And does that sort of impede, do they always want to talk to you about what you're working on, or are they quite clever about keeping that separate from your work?
People are, it's actually, for a long time, both people didn't know at sort of previous employers, and also I was less comfortable with it. At my current place, which I've been at about a year, people are incredibly supportive about it. And it's actually, it helps in the sense that it makes me feel a little bit less sort of, you know, that I have to partition myself in terms of who I am and in terms of what I can sort of let leak out into the world. On the other hand, there was something about the kind of, secret identity nature of being this dual person, and that was a little bit exciting, and maybe paid some sort of internal dividends, in that I felt like, well, here's the secret space that I have for myself. So, I mean, personally and kind of psychologically, I think it's a wonderful thing to have people be supportive and curious without sort of overstepping boundaries. But there is something there to be said for keeping, a little bit of yourself outside of the workplace, and or more than a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a lot of yourself.
Yeah,
right.
and despite the fact that you called your main character Charlie Yu, that's a lovely idea. Good luck with it. I love reading your work. Lots of life lessons, and we'll see you next time on Furious Fiction.
Thanks so much, Charlie.
Thank you both.